Hello, this is the Lord's Legion and welcome to a brand new movie review. And I know I don't normally do reviews in general, but I kinda want to start doing them again, and if any of you guys want to see me continue doing reviews, then suggest me something else to review or something. And as you can tell by the thumbnail and title, then the review in question is of course in relation to Thor Ragnarok, which was quite possibly everyone's most anticipated MCU film of the year. And what do I think of the film in general? It's pretty good. Nothing high art, nothing terrible. Hell, I wouldn't even consider this as the most fun MCU movie. And I'm sorry, I do feel like Thor Ragnarok, in my opinion at least, is a bit of a letdown. And if you do like the film more than me, then more power to you. As a matter of fact, there's a lot to enjoy from this film. But in my opinion, I feel like Thor Ragnarok could have been something more. As a whole, the cast in this film are probably at their best, specifically with Chris Hemsworth as Thor, because in this film we actually get to enjoy the character a lot more as opposed to him just being a powerhouse. And unlike the other movies that Thor was previously in, we actually get to see him further developed, and taking him out of the element for the most part is a really great idea. And at this point it comes as no surprise that Tom Hiddleston as Loki is such a pleasure to watch. And it's always incredibly fascinating to see where this character will be heading next, whether he's going to backstab his allies or whether he legitimately has redemption in him. And Loki bounces off with Thor perfectly, and it's really great to see the relationship further develop. And we also have Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, and I'm not gonna lie, he is a very good inclusion in Thor Ragnarok. And I especially love how they're actually trying something new with the Hulk and giving him his own mind. And although his character does seem a little redundant after his battle in Sakaar with Thor, the Hulk was still very enjoyable to watch regardless. And seeing as how we haven't seen him since Age of Ultron, to me the Hulk is still a welcomed inclusion. Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie is also a very nice inclusion. She's ruthless, badass, and just downright tragic. But again, much like with Hulk, I do wish that they could have done a bit more with her character, especially how she has a very interesting backstory in the Thor mythos. And as for the whole controversy revolving around her being bi in this film, they only subtly hint towards this once, and they don't even beat you over the head with it. And as for Anthony Hopkins as Odin, despite having a very little amount of screen time, he was always very enjoyable to watch. And I especially loved the twist revolving around Odin and Asgard. And I won't spoil it here, but let's just say that Odin has a lot of skeletons in his closet. Jeff Goldblum as the Grandmaster was also a very enjoyable character and was also quite possibly the most hilarious in the entire film. And although his screen time isn't as big as some of the other characters, it's very enjoyable to see the Grandmaster be a very enjoyable weird asshole. And I feel like we had just enough time with the character, and hopefully we get to see more of the Grandmaster in the future. Even Idris Elba had more to do this time around as Heimdall, and seeing as how Heimdall is one of my personal favourite characters in the Thor movies, it's always great to see Heimdall as a badass. Carl Urban as Scourge the Executioner was also a really interesting character, and I especially like how they made Scourge as more than just a henchman, but just an all-round conflicted character. Taika Waititi as Korg was also a surprise standout in this film, and he is up there with the Grandmaster as two of the funniest characters in the entire film. And it should be interesting to see what Marvel has to offer for Korg in the future. And although Surtur did serve his purpose in the film, I was hoping that we would get to see at least one more scene with him as a villain, because Surtur is such a huge part in the Thor mythos, and it's so disappointing to see that he was very underutilized. Oh, we also get to see Doctor Strange in this film, which isn't really a spoiler seeing as how he was in a few adverts. And again, it's no surprise to say this, but Benedict Cumberbatch is really great in that role. And although he wasn't really needed in the film, it is still good to see him regardless. And finally we get to Cate Blanchett as Hela, who had quite a lot to fulfill seeing as how Hela is the first ever female villain to be a main antagonist in an MCU film. And also the fact that a lot of the villains are often seen as either bland or forgettable. So does Cate Blanchett escape through the cracks and become one of the greats in the MCU? Well, yes and no. Now as far as her performance as well as how she was written, I fucking love Hela in this film. Her backstory was very interesting, her motivations were clear, and she was a downright force of nature. She was sadistic, devious, sinister, and just downright hardcore. Hell, as far as MCU villains are concerned, I would put her in the top 5. She is that good. However, the problem with Hela in Thor Ragnarok is the fact that she is just brushed over as something ruthless. And also, she didn't really have much to do outside of a few fight scenes, which is unfortunate because Hela was written so well and her backstory was very interesting. And with her connections to Thor and Odin, they could have done so much more with her as a character, and it's such a shame that she was just so underused. Now, the fight scenes as a whole were pretty hit and miss. Some of them, like the Thor vs Hulk fight in Sakaar, was downright amazing, and even Hela's brief fight with all of the Asgardians was so brutally glorious. But then you also have the final battle, which to me just felt incredibly underwhelming. And although the stakes were raised incredibly high, you just couldn't really feel them because the film decided to have more chokes as opposed to more drama, and there really isn't a good enough balance. And speaking of the lack of balance, it was incredibly jarring to see that they kept switching between the entire Ragnarok segment as well as the Sakaar segment, because to me they both felt like two completely different movies at points. And I feel like the pacing in the first half at least was incredibly jumpy, as they jumped from point A to point B in a matter of minutes, and without really much progression. And as for the chokes, although I admit that there are a good chunk that do work, there are a handful to me that were huge misses. But at the end of the day, although I do seem negative in this review, I still had a ton of fun with Thor Ragnarok. The cast were top notch, the effects were great, some of the fight scenes were hit and miss, but when they hit, they really hit hard. And the same could even be said with the humour, as I did chuckle quite a bit while watching the film. And overall, it's a huge improvement in comparison to Guardians Volume 2. Because unlike how Guardians 2 was pretty much a retread, at the very least Thor Ragnarok was being something new. And going into Thor Ragnarok, I didn't have the highest expectations like most people did, and because Thor Ragnarok had a ton of problems such as the lack of balance between jokes and drama, as well as some pacing issues with mostly the first half at least, and even at points I felt like the film was even dragging. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for something incredibly fun, then chances are you would probably enjoy this film more than I did. And again, Thor Ragnarok isn't a bad movie by any stretch, and there's a lot to enjoy, but at the end of the day, I was just a little underwhelmed as all. And ultimately, I'm going to give Thor Ragnarok a 7 out of 10. I may have had a ton of problems with Thor Ragnarok, and I did find it a little disappointing, but in the end, the good outweighs the bad, and Thor Ragnarok is the best in the Thor trilogy. So have you seen Thor Ragnarok yet, and what do you personally think of the movie? Comment below and share some thoughts, and as always, thank you guys for watching this video, please like and subscribe, take care, and have a good one.